So, hello everybody. You're very welcome to this Law Society information session. I'm joined today by Richard Kelly, Sergio Spagnolo, and I'm waiting for Joseph Maguire to join us. And we're going to be having a session around the European Public Prosecutor's Office and how does that all work. So I'd like to just introduce you to Sergio. Sergio, would you like to just say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having invited me to this panel. I'm an Italian lawyer. I specialize in criminal law. In the last 2-3 years, we had some cases involving European Public Prosecutor Office. So I will try to give you my impressions about how it is working in Italy, and just also give you some numbers and to describe you the organization of the EPPO here in Italy.
And Richard, we're just waiting for Joe to join us here now. He came in as so he's going to join us now. Joe, we are very welcome. We're delighted to see you.
You can hear me here, okay?
We can, of course. It's great to see you, Joe. I must say that an element of relief has just sort of descended on us here. So,
very good. I was promoted to panelist, as I said on the Zoom call. So the technology has worked, which is great.
Very good. So you're all very welcome to this practice support information session. Today we're going to be discussing the European Public Prosecution's Office. You're very welcome, Joe. You're very welcome, Sergio. And I know we've got a limited amount of time. Richard is here from the EU and IA Committee of the Law Society, and Megan is Secretary to that committee as well. So you're all very welcome, and everyone on the panel or on the audience is also very welcome. We'll take questions on the chat, but without further ado, I'll just introduce you to Joe, who works at the European Public Prosecutor's Office, and he's going to tell us exactly what goes on, its legal framework, his role, and how it works in practice, and cooperation and future possibilities relevant to Irish lawyers. And then Sergio is going to give us a practical example of how it all works. So hopefully we'll be much better informed at the end. If anyone would like to ask us a question, we'll take it on the chat, and preferably at the end, I think we'll take them all. So over to you, Joe.
That's great. It's lovely to be here. So I'm here in Luxembourg, the European Public Prosecutor's Office. So it's actually right beside the European Court of Justice. So I suppose actually many people I think will be tuning in from the Chief State Solicitor's Office, where I worked for many years. And then it was in March 2019 I started my EU adventure, and I went to DG Justice in the European Commission in Brussels. So that's actually the portfolio that Minister Michael McGrath is taking over next week, effectively. And then on the 1st of September 2022, that's just 2 years ago, I joined the European Public Prosecutor's Office here in Luxembourg. So I've actually, as I said, it's great actually to be back in contact with the Law Society, and I wrote my first 2 articles actually on the EPPO, both in the Law Society Gazette actually, which gives kind of an outline actually of the EPPO. At that stage actually, things are actually happening, and then Ireland is gradually moving towards joining the EPPO. But essentially, actually, to summarize, what is the EPPO? It's basically an independent public prosecution service set up here in Luxembourg in the EU, with a specific mandate to investigate, prosecute, and bring to judgment crimes against the financial interests of the EU. So it's basically a brand new EU body, but it's specifically confined to where there's fraud of EU funds. Now, at the moment, actually, there are 24 member states have joined, because Poland and Sweden have just joined. So there's only 3 actually member states that are currently not inside the EPPO, which is Ireland, Hungary, and Denmark. And Denmark effectively always has an opt-out, and there's certain political reasons regarding Hungary. So essentially, I suppose, referring to the EPPO, the basic legal framework is set out in the EPPO regulation of 2017. That's 2017-1939. And basically on the 20th of November 2017, any crimes regarding EU financial interests come within the mandate of the EPPO. So what sort of crimes are we talking about? We're talking, for example, about subsidy fraud. So say, for example, there's EU funds are given for various programs in agriculture, social funds, so on. Well, then that's obviously EU money. And after the after the pandemic, the European Commission spent quite a considerable amount of money on a next generation for recovery and resilience facility. So that there are some of the cases actually that have actually also emerged in some countries such as Italy. And another thing actually people probably are aware of is regarding VAT. Obviously, the VAT comes to the national exchequer, but a very small percentage of VAT comes into the EU budget. And on that basis, actually, the EU legislature decided that if the VAT carousel or VAT fraud is more than 10 million and it involves more than 2 member states, then the EPPO here in Luxembourg has competence actually to prosecute. Now, interesting actually, so the EPPO regulation of 2017, that's actually which set up the EPPO, and then connected with it is what's called a so-called PIF directive, which is the protection of international financial affairs, or as it comes from the French. And interestingly, Ireland actually has implemented and transposed that directive, both in the Criminal Justice Corruption Offences Act 2018 and also the Criminal Justice Theft and Fraud Offences Amendment Act 2021. So the actual material competence, as it were, for the EPPO's offences, they are part of Irish law, but obviously Ireland is not part of the EPPO yet, though we'll see developments in the future. So basically, in summary, actually, that's basically what the EPP does. It investigates, prosecutes and brings to judgment crimes against the financial interests of the EU. Now, maybe some people might be aware that in Brussels there is an organisation called OLAF, which is the EU anti-fraud organisation, and it could actually investigate and investigate various matters of EU crimes, but all it could do was just pass the information on to the member state. So it was considered effectively that it wasn't very effective in prosecuting and investigating. Well, the OLAF never had any prosecution powers, but it was felt that actually the prosecution of EU fraud wasn't really happening. So that's why the EPPO was actually set up here in Luxembourg. So we've got a brand new building just overlooking the European Court of Justice. And essentially, the EPPO is divided into 2 parts. It's the central part here in Luxembourg, where you have a European prosecutor from each of the member states that has joined. And you also have staff, actually, for example, to work on obviously IT and also financial investigators. So it's a bit like, I worked obviously in the Chief State Solicitor's Office, the Criminal Assets Bureau, where you bring together investigators, police officers, tax officers, lawyers all together. So it's a bit like that in that the central office actually in Luxembourg plays that part. But very significantly, even though it is an EU body, it's an EU body, the actual prosecutions and investigations take place in the member states. So we'll hear quite soon from Sergio, who will be given an example of some of his EPPO related cases that he has dealt with. So it's very interesting because effectively it's still one EU body. It's 2 parts, the centralized part here in Luxembourg and the decentralized part in the member states. And effectively, you have a number of European delegated prosecutors who are prosecutors just like prosecutors in the member states, but they're specifically employed to deal with these EU fraud cases. And so what actually happens is that when all the cases are opened, they come into into a computer system, and then they're randomly allocated by an algorithm between so-called 15 permanent chambers. And what happens is that all the instructions and directions of the monitoring of the investigation and the prosecutions are then directed by the permanent chambers here in Luxembourg. So it's a bit loosely like the directing division of the DPP's office in Ireland. But it's quite interesting in that so therefore the prosecution will start, say, for example, in Italy, you have the Guardia di Finanza, which are the financial police. They start the investigation. They send documentation to the European delegated prosecutor, for example, in Milan or Rome, and they will start actually the investigation. But those European delegated prosecutors will then have to send the information and progress reports here to the permanent chambers here in Luxembourg. And an interesting feature of the permanent chambers is it consists of 3 prosecutors, but the 3 prosecutors aren't from the country involved. So if, for example, it's an Italian case, the case will come before 3 European prosecutors, none of them from Italy. And actually, my job, actually, I'm the legal officer to one of the permanent chambers. So my job actually is then to review the papers that come through from the European delegated prosecutors and then present them before the European prosecutors, and then we make various decisions whether to prosecute or dismiss the case, or maybe approve a plea bargain if it is coming from Italy, or maybe refer it back to the national authorities if there's an issue over the EPPO's material competence. But quite significantly, that at each meeting that takes place here in Luxembourg, the supervising European prosecutor from the country involved will come into the meeting. So it's the idea that, you know, for example, I do a lot of Italian cases, but it's to make sure that nobody misses the nuances and the realities of what's actually happening on the ground. So it's a very interesting structure. It's never actually been done before, where you have a prosecutor who's not from the country that decides and directs the prosecutions. But one of the whole points of the EPPO is obviously transnational crime, organized crime in relation to VAT carousels, for example, is so large that you can only really put the information together if you're bringing all the member states together. And what's quite interesting is that in the past, if, say, for example, there was a so-called VAT carousel fraud in Germany, and there was a connections in Italy and Slovenia and Belgium, well, in that case, you had to go through the whole mutual legal assistance requirements. But in this case, effectively, EPPO was like one indivisible body where it's all European prosecutors, European delegated prosecutors, effectively sharing all the information, you know, and with a centralized, coherent policy here in Luxembourg. So that's kind of basically a basic outline, actually, of the EPPO, the setup, and my particular role to make sure, obviously, that there's consistent decision making across the member states. I suppose actually, I'll just actually, which is quite interesting, we've actually had a couple of cases actually which have preliminary references on the EPPO, which have gone next door, just behind me, to the European Court of Justice. And what's quite interesting is that the EPPO is an EU body, so it's EU law, and normally, obviously, any EU orders are challenged or brought before the European courts. But in this case, all the reality of practical criminal law, which, you know, Sergio will be talking about quite soon, they all happen in the national member states. And so you couldn't have a situation where you'd effectively turn the European Court of Justice into a regular appeal court or judicial review court for all the ordinary things that are happening in the criminal courts. So interestingly, most of the appeal mechanisms and judicial reviews all take place back in the member states, but with the possibility of preliminary references can make their way here to the Court of Justice in Luxembourg to have a consistent clarified view of the law. And I suppose just to give you two examples, we had one actually on the first decision was given by the Grand Chamber in just before Christmas last year, and it was in relation to what was called assisting measures, and it was basically where you had a fraud between Germany and Austria, and the query was that if authorization had been given in Austria, did you have to get it doubly done in Germany? And without actually going into too much into the nitty-gritty of the case, the reality is that a purpose of interpretation was taken by the court, which effectively facilitated the authorization taking place in one country. And obviously, the fundamental rights had to be respected where the execution took place. But effectively, it's a much simpler form of mutual legal assistance. And then the second one, actually, which quite interesting, in the Court of Justice there in September, and it was just coincidentally just after the European Court of Justice gave his judgment in the famous Apple case, where we all got 14 billion back into the Irish Exchequer. Immediately afterwards, there was a preliminary reference regarding the EPPO, and it was regarding witness summonses and situations in Spain. And people might be interested that it was the Irish Advocate General, Tony Collins, gave the opinion just before he finished up here in Luxembourg and returns to the Court of Appeal. So that's a few interesting, actually, background to some of the EPPO. And I have actually, as two quite short articles which I wrote in the Law Society Gazette, which may also be of interest. So I'll just actually move on into the involvement of Ireland. Now, I suppose actually when you're working in the Chief State Solicitor's Office and also for an EU body, you're always kind of not sure what you can say about when Ireland might join. So I wasn't actually that sure, but thankfully, actually, the situation was made clear by the Irish Commissioner Michael McGrath on the 5th of November. That was the day of the American election, was the day that he was going through a 3-hour question and answer session in the European Parliament about him becoming the Commissioner for Justice. And so he was actually asked about Ireland and the EPPO. And he effectively said actually that Ireland is actually on the pathway to joining the EPPO. And he talked about an intention before the Irish presidency in perhaps mid 2026. So this is actually very significant for Irish lawyers in that in the second half of 2026, Ireland will have the EU presidency. We've now got an Irish Commissioner for Justice, Mr. Michael Maguire, and he has mentioned that before around the presidency 2026, he said that Ireland is now on the pathway. So I'll actually just quote what he said. He'd also point out the recent approach of Ireland when it comes to a range of files like the e-evidence regulation. So the e-evidence, obviously you've got a lot of the Microsoft and Google and Meta all in Dublin, but the e-evidence regulation comes into force in 2026, and also it's also the transfer of criminal proceeding regulation. So Ireland actually is joining a lot more and becoming involved in more EU justice measures. And he said that wherever possible, the government will try to align the Irish common law system for Ireland to opt into some of the existing and any future instruments for criminal justice cooperation. He says something that I will encourage, and I know that Ireland is now on a pathway to joining the EPPO, and I look forward to work with the Irish authorities to make sure that's concluded. So it's not very sure when actually Ireland will specifically. He's given maybe 2 years' time during the Irish presidency, but we'll obviously see how things actually develop. But it should also be pointed out actually that last year Ireland did implement the Criminal Justice Mutual Provisions Act 2023, and that allows for mutual legal assistance between Ireland and the EPPO, and that came into force on the 1st of November last year. And effectively that means that if there's EPPO requests, the cooperation through the mutual legal assistance can take place through Ireland. Obviously, if Ireland joins, just like the member states that are joined, we have a much more advanced system where effectively you consider the EPPO as one body, one indivisible EU body, decentralized level. So you're avoiding actually you're making it even simpler than the mutual legal assistance. So I said actually there about future possibilities for Irish lawyers. So well, obviously if Ireland joins in a couple of years' time, then there will obviously be jobs obviously in relation to lawyers working for the EPPO and financial investigators, but equally, of course, it's going to bring a large amount of work for lawyers based in Ireland, defence lawyers. I can imagine there will be interesting cases brought to the superior courts and perhaps in the Court of Justice. And that's actually something that the EPPO would like, because we like to get these matters clarified clarified through the courts. And maybe it could replicate a bit like the European arrest warrant system. Like obviously European arrest warrants over 20 years ago were all a brand new thing, but there's a regular list actually, as many of the people tuning in from the Chief State Solicitor's Office continue to go to. And it'll be interesting to see that ultimately when Ireland, or assuming that Ireland actually does join, there will be a lot of there probably mightn't be that many actual prosecutions to begin with. It will involve a bit of a change of a system in that in the continental civil law system has is much more involved in the investigations. Well, there's a clear separation between investigation and prosecution in Ireland, but ultimately it's the national procedures are very important, and they're obviously respected in the system. But also I'd imagine that there would be quite a lot of I suppose my office that worked in the Chief State Solicitor's Office, could be a lot of mutual legal assistance and requests like that to assist with cross-border crime. And I think that's just a broad outline actually then of the EPPO. Maybe actually I might actually it might actually start maybe by introducing Sergio, because it's having spoken with him actually, it's very interesting to see that he's actually had a very good positive experience of the EPPO from the defence point of view. So if that's okay with you, Justin, maybe I'll start the conversation with
Sure.
Sergio.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Well, yes, I had a very positive experience. Before that, I would like to give you a short overview of the concrete EPPO experience in Italy, and then speak very shortly about my experience and my feelings about this experience. First of all, Italy is one of the countries, together with Germany and I think Romania, that has the highest number of European public prosecutors. Nowadays we have 17 public prosecutors, but within the end of the year, so now probably they will become 20. Obviously, the number of the public prosecutors varies from country to country, and it depends on the amount of work and complexity of the cases. Now I will share. No, now we cannot. Okay, we cannot share. I had some little slides, but no problems. Actually, I was saying the European office is based in Italy in 7 cities, the most important cities. We have Milan, Rome, Bologna, Venice, Turin, Palermo in the south of Italy, and if I remember also Turin. You have to consider that I give you some statistics taken from the 2023 annual report of the EPPO. On a total amount of more than 1,300 cases and 12 billion euros dealt by the EPPO. More than 500 cases were dealt by the Italian public prosecutors for an amount of money of more or less 6 billion euros. The public prosecutor offices are helped by 50 assistants to the public prosecutors. And this is, I spoke with one of them, who is a friend of mine. He worked with us some time ago. And he was very happy because he said that differently from what happened before in court, let me say, so we have one court with the public prosecutors and the court. And now he has this personal assistant who is a very, very qualified person. And he says that his help is absolutely of utmost importance with respect to what he did before, because before he had many different assistants, not specialized, whilst in this case, obviously they are very focused on the problem. So he was very happy about that. What can I say more? That in Italy, the most part of the cases deals with non-procurement expenditure fraud and VAT revenue fraud. These are the most pursued crime. Well, maybe you're wondering why we have this record in Italy, and maybe because there are more criminals, this is possible, but joking apart, I think that one of the reasons is based on what also Joe said before. We have a very good specialized police force, that's the Guardia di Finanza, the tax police, who is really very, very specialized on financial crimes. And this, on my opinion, helped the public prosecutor to start more criminal action against financial crime. I have to say that Guardia di Finanza also before was really a forefront in financial crime, and some countries now I know that are trying to build up police forces on the model of the Guardia di Finanza, of our tax police. They have, we spoke recently with one of the Guardia di Finanza members, and he said that nowadays from the EPPO, they have a great help because they have centralized information. They can gather immediately the informations they need. With before they had to ask to the public prosecutor to ask for a rogatory commission, and this was really a trouble, not from the lawyer's point of view, but from the justice point of view, because usually here in Italy, it took 1 or 2 years to have an answer to rogatory commissions. We had a case, if I remember well, with Ireland or UK, in which, in a very big case, it was a Parmala case some years ago, it was a very well-known trial, in which the answers to the request of the Guardia di Finanza, the public prosecutor, came in 3 years. And this was really a problem, with now, on our recent experience, without asking for a regulatory commission. In 1 month, the Guardia di Finanza gathered all the information. And this is thanks to the EPP office that obviously has a data bank that can be shared by the other public prosecutor and police forces. I want just only to mention one very, very recent case. It's an open source. It's from the EPPO office. That's called Moby Dick operation. This Moby Dick operation that was finished on November 24, so last week, and is well known now, has involved almost 2,000 suspects. There were 43 arrest warrants, 160 searches, 10 countries involved, and 520 million freezing orders. So, and this was possible thanks to this synergy between police force, European police forces, national police forces, and EPPO office. I think that this is a very good way of pursuing crimes. Let me also add that there are many advantages. I found a couple of disadvantages, but that can be surely solved in the future. First of all, I think that the first advantage is that there is a great constant improvement of the cross-the-border cooperation because EPPO offers an unified approach to matters, and this is very important to us. There is the shared data bank that is fundamental. They can exchange both prosecutors and police forces immediately information about the cases and about all the information that is needed for a correct investigation. And the most important thing maybe is that nowadays the EPPO allows the public prosecutor to make connections between persons and to know exactly all the data relevant for the individuation of the crimes and the persons who committed the crime. Just to make an example, we had a case that is, to me, quite significant. There is one of our clients that was prosecuted many times here in Italy for VAT fraud. But he was always acquitted because the public prosecutor, let me say, both for the fact that the rogatories commission were difficult to speed up, both for the fact that they did not have information about the foreign bank accounts of this person, didn't have the evidence of what he was doing. As soon as the EPPO was built up, he was condemned better. And this is another reason why I feel there is an advantage. He reached an agreement with the European public prosecutor. He paid what he did. It was due to the state and to as a restoring of damages. And we have a particular method here in Italy. We have a plea bargain that usually in many countries, but in financial crime, the indicted person can ask for the plea bargain only if he has restored the damage. So once the investigation started and the PPO office was able to gather all the evidence, he was obliged to restore the damages to get the plea bargain. So this is very, very important. It's a technique that, to me, it's very effective. And this is one of the demonstration of the results that the EPP office has gained through his organization. Let me just say, just to go to the end of the examples, I was saying the advantage is also the efficiency in the investigation, avoiding the delays in the rogatory commission, the uniformity of the procedures that are also very important, and and how can I say, a more comfortable dialogue between lawyers and the public prosecutor. Our experience, my experience, is that of a very, very fair discussion between the public prosecutor and myself. We were able to obtain immediately appointments to discuss about the case, whilst in the other cases, it's quite impossible here in Milan, especially, to have immediate meetings with the public prosecutor because they have more than 100,000 proceedings pending. And this, the institution of this European Public Prosecutor Office with 17 public prosecutors allows them to focus on the case and to react immediately and to have immediate, how can I say, an immediate dialogue with the lawyers. Just to end with this, I would like to remember that we had a case which involved an Italian company, but that imported goods from Thailand. The public prosecutor indicted this company, the person of the company, because he said, the police say, the customs say that the goods were not imported from Thailand, but from China, in that way evading the VAT, and the Olaf was involved in this. In 2 months, we resolved the problem because we were able to gather investigative defensive investigation that we did. The public prosecutor read it and we closed the case. But it was very useful for the client in this case, because otherwise, through the regulatory commission, it would have been under process for 2 or 3 years. Just to finish, the disadvantages. What I am feeling now, and this is probably something that will be resolved in the future, is that there is a risk of, how can I say, a forum shopping, cherry picking of the place in which the trial will be done, because the public prosecutor are not divided here in Italy, but I don't think only in Italy, are not divided by the jurisdiction. If a public prosecutor thinks that there is an European financial crime, he takes it with no regard, let me say, to the jurisdiction. And this could cause a little problem because the court, with the EPPO, is specialized. The courts are not specialized. We don't have specialized courts. So, for instance, a public prosecutor of Milan has to go in Veneto, who is a region near Milan, to deal with the trial. With problems of jurisdiction, because if I were the lawyer defendant, I would say, well, but this is not the natural jurisdiction of this fraud. The natural jurisdiction is in Palermo or in Rome or abroad. And this could cause problem, let me say, mainly between the public prosecutor and the court. Also, on a material point of view, I would say, because all the files are in one place, then you have to bring the files to the other place. There is the possibility of declaring null and void the summons order because the jurisdiction is not there. So these are cases that did not happen until now, but it is possible that will happen in the future. So maybe it could be useful to focus better on the jurisdiction. I think I finished. Maybe no. I want only to say that my feeling is very, very positive, both for lawyers, public prosecutor, the state, European community, and also the defendant, because the example I was making before about the possibility of obtaining the plea bargain immediately, paying what you due to the European community, is a way of solving the problem, also for the defendant, I think. So these are my feelings. It's my experience. So I can be wrong, but we will see in the future.
That's fantastic, actually, Sergio. It's great actually to get your perspective from the defense side, actually, and Actually, I'll just actually explore a bit about that, the plea bargains. It's obviously in the American system, people are familiar with the plea bargains. We don't actually have plea bargains in Ireland, but I would just like, I would emphasize obviously the national procedures in Italy still apply, because I think sometimes maybe I think that might be a point, maybe if you just want to emphasize a bit, when you actually go to the court, you said there's no actual specialized courts for the EPPO, but really, from your point of view, is everything pretty much the same when you actually go to court in Italy when you're dealing with an EPPO case?
Well, do you mean if there are courts that usually deals with this?
Yes.
Yes, well, let me say that the courts, I give you the example of Milan. Milan has 10 sections, and each section has 4 or 5 courts. So there are many courts. And yes, they are divided on the basis of some crimes. So for instance, bankruptcy is assigned to the 4th section of the court, financial crimes to the 3rd. But, you know, it happens that the magistrates that are part of the courts, that are 3, are not so well specialized in financial. So sometimes it's quite difficult not to make them understand, because obviously they are judges, they know the law, but it's a little more difficult to explain them the evidence we gather, both from the public prosecutor side and the court side. We had some difficulties in the approach, especially in making them understand the difference between an administrative procedure, a tax procedure, and a criminal procedure. Often there was a little bit of confusion between these two fields that are different and have different procedures. So, for instance, if there is a tax evasion, not always the tax evasion is a crime. In some cases, tax evasion could be solved on an administrative basis, and is not a crime. There is an amount of money that has to be reached. There is a different willful intent in the criminal and in the mere tax evasion. So this was a little bit difficult. But what I was referring to is the fact that, to me, it could be very useful, as it happens in other places, other countries, that each, I'm talking obviously about big criminal fields. So how can I say, intellectual property, or tax evasion, or conspiracy, should have their courts, because the case law is a huge quantity. They have to know everything. And now in Italy, we have a little bit of problems in trying to have specialized courts. I think that the best idea would be that of having a specialized court in the same venue of the EPPO office. This could be very useful and, how can I say, helpful for everybody.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I might actually just a bit of discussion actually on that so-called forum shopping point. That's very interesting. For example, just like last year, I had a German VAT carousel fraud, and the German European delegated prosecutor, she realized actually that the whole focus of the criminal activity, there was nothing left in Germany. It was only what they often say, a straw man, or nothing there. So she realized that the EPPO here in Luxembourg could see all the connections to all the different countries, and they could see that most of the activity was happening in Italy. So in that case, actually, it comes up to the permanent chamber. And then I would obviously do the legal analysis, and then we would decide actually that for all practical reasons it made sense actually to reallocate the case from the German European delegated prosecutor to the Italian European delegated prosecutor. And it actually, I think actually if somebody looked at it, it seemed relatively uncontentious, but I think it's on the Article 26 actually, for example, of the the EPPO regulation looks into that whole issue that basically it should take place in the member state where the bulk of the offences have been committed, and then you have actually you have the general interest of justice, and you have various criteria that, for example, the place of the suspect's habitual residence, then after the nationality, then the place where the financial damage. So you have actually a structure in Article 26. So it's funny, in the ones that I've dealt with them, I think if me and you, Sergio, were looking at it, it would have seemed obvious to transfer it. But that's definitely, I think, people looking ahead, as you can have more complicated cases, this is a great case that may well be litigated in the courts in Italy or other member states, and then there is the possibility that of preliminary references for an overall view to be given by the Court of Justice in Luxembourg. So it's at early stages, but I suppose the investigative part is very strong, as you mentioned, and the Guardia di Finanza, the financial police, are very much leading the way in showing how it's successfully done through Italy. So I'm delighted actually that you've had a positive experience, and also that at some stage that plea bargain, that was one of the issues that I had, that you were able to deal with it very effectively with your European delegated prosecutor in Milan. At some stage, that prosecutor would have had to send it up through the chain to the permanent chamber in Luxembourg. So thankfully, lawyers here haven't delayed anything, and everything moved very smoothly. So that's just fantastic, actually. Thank you very much, Sergio. Maybe I'm not sure where the questions are now, Justin. But
Joe, could I just point out to the viewers that you have to raise your hand. The chat function seems to have disappeared in this version. So I know there's two people who want to ask a question: Sheila Creedon and Bernard O'Connor.
Oh, very good.
So I'll take Sheila. I'll just allow you. You'll have to speak and ask the question. So Sheila, I'll just pull you up here now. That works for you. And if not, I'll go back to Bernard as next. Bernard O'Connor. So Sheila, do you want to ask your question, Sheila Creedon? And then maybe I'll just bring on Bernard O'Connor as well. If that's possible. So Bernard, if you would like to ask your question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, my question is a fairly simple question. The European delegated EPPO officer, prosecutor, is he an Italian trained lawyer who has kind of gone up through the Italian system and is now working with the EPPO? Or is it somebody who kind of comes down from Luxembourg and is kind of imposed by Luxembourg on the Italian system, and the individual has to learn the whole Italian, the niceties of Italian law? I mean, there's a very simple question. If you could explain that, Sergio or Joe.
I will, of course. Yeah, thanks, Bernard, actually, and it's nice to see you again. Bernard, actually, myself, actually last met in Brussels, so there's lots of EU conferences taking place. And yes, actually, effectively, the European delegated prosecutor is effectively a public prosecutor with all the powers of an Italian lawyer. So the European delegated prosecutor will be effectively a prosecutor from Italy who's lots of experience on Italian prosecutions, and with the specialization now in financial crime. But the key difference is that the European delegated prosecutor, once he or she becomes part of the EPPO, they're independent and then separate from they're not taking any instructions, so they're separate from their national prosecutor. So it's true then actually that obviously there's a positions in the EPPO regulation for appointing the European delegated prosecutors and then extending their time and so on, and obviously that kind of goes through Luxembourg. But all the European delegated prosecutors are lawyers and prosecutors from their member state, because effectively it's the national procedures. All the prosecutions take place between Italy, Germany, Spain. It's just that the directing and the overview, which actually Sergio explained very well, that takes actually place in Luxembourg. And then there is obviously competition to choose the European prosecutor. So you have one European prosecutor who comes from Italy, who becomes the European prosecutor working in Luxembourg for a number of years. So in the Luxembourg office, you have one European prosecutor from each of the member states.
And so, Bernard, let me just add the fact that, and this is a positive thing, the European Public Prosecutor Office in Milan is composed by public prosecutors who work a lot in the local public prosecutor office, And really, they are the best public prosecutor we had in the last few years. This public prosecutor, every of these very good public prosecutor went to work in the European Public Prosecutor Office. And they are really happy. They work very well. And they told me that there is a slight difference, also because they have new offices, very nice offices, and they are working in a totally different way, in a very good way. So, and we too are very happy to deal with them only on this matter, because before it was quite impossible to talk with them. They had too many trials pending, too many cases pending, and now it's slightly different. Anyway, to answer to your request, they are very experienced public prosecutors.
And conveniently for Ireland, the working language of the EPPO is English. So the European delegated prosecutors will do obviously all their prosecutions obviously in Italian in Italy, but they will have sent certain progress reports and their proposals in English, and then they will make their way and be discussed in English in the permanent chamber, and then the permanent chamber will take a decision, and then it will be translated into Italian, obviously for an Italian case. So.
So, Joe, we're sort of coming to the end now, last couple of minutes. If anyone else wants to ask a question, you just have to raise your hand. I know, Joe, you were going to give some just guidance around the EPPO website and where to find out reports.
Yeah, that's actually good. Probably one of the best places if you put in the EPPO, European Public Prosecutor's Office, into the internet search, you'll very quickly find our website, and there's a good selection of just a summary of the sort of cases we're dealing with, as Sergio referred to. Lots of those cases where a so-called anti-dumping duty or anti-dumping duty cases where customs were evaded by pretending that they came from Thailand or Vietnam when really they came from China, where they would have had to pay the much higher tariffs actually. So there's a whole series actually of cases on the EPPO website, and in particular the annual report is very good to look at. So that's it. And as I said, it's good. I also started everything with the Law Society, in that my couple of articles come up quite easily on an internet search on the EPPO. And also, yeah, thanks as well actually to Bernard and also Ross, the previous chair of the committee, for setting all this up, along with Megan and yourself, Justin.
Yeah, so we just have a last question there from Tom. I was hoping that he was going to. You need to unmute yourself, Tom, if you want to ask a question. Tom Brown.
Hi, sorry, my question is just for Joseph. Just in relation to Ireland, Ireland's obviously a common law country, so it's very different to our European counterparts. So I know Michael McGrath indicated on the 5th of November that we're on the pathway for possible membership of the EPPO, but how would be envisaged that, but due to the separation of powers in the common law jurisdiction, how it would work in our system in respect of a delegated prosecutor for EPPO, or would that be discussed in EPPO at a Luxembourg level of how that would be looked at from Ireland's perspective?
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. As I said, Ireland, I'm not entirely sure how Ireland is actually practically going to decide it. Like, that's obviously for other people. And I was kind of a bit concerned, what will I say about Ireland joining? And then it was quite convenient that Michael McGrath said that in the European Parliament on the 5th of November. I think for a time, actually, I suppose where there's a will, there's a way. Things actually can be resolved. One of the issues, obviously, of course, is that the separation between the investigation and the prosecution, the common law system. But at the same time, I can see how effectively it'll be for people in Ireland to actually to work out the system and see how it actually develops in practice. If obviously when Ireland joins, you'll have a European prosecutor in Luxembourg, and then you'll have European delegated prosecutors in Ireland. So it just would mean that there will be some. But maybe one interesting point to make is that even the continental legal systems had to make various changes for the EPPO to join. People might be familiar, the so-called investigating judge, the juge d'instruction, that kind of created certain issues, and some member states had to effectively amend that. So specifically to your question on the nitty-gritty, I'm not entirely sure. That's for others with a higher pay grade to work that out. But obviously people are thinking about it, and the other countries have managed you know, for even Cyprus, for example, has certain aspects of the common law. Ireland is obviously the entirely common law, but I can see, I have certain ideas how it could work, but I think it's other people actually. We'll find out in due course.
So, guys, I think we've come to a natural end, and a very informative session. I'd like to thank Sergio, live from Italy. Thank you very much for joining us, and Joseph from Luxembourg, Richard, and Megan, and Ross also, who helped us out in this information session. We've made a recording. We'll send it out to you in a couple of days' time, and it'll be available on the YouTube and Law Society website. So, unless anyone has anything further to add, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day. So,
Thanks to you. Bye bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Guys.